Hey guys, how are you all doing? My name is Rob of Rule of Two Review, and welcome back to our regularly scheduled programming. So today should be a lot of fun. We get back to a regular video from Rule of Two Review, which I'm pretty excited about. Been a really crazy weekend, a crazy last couple of days. Obviously, the last video that I made yesterday was a different kind of video from Rule of Two Review. A little bit polarizing, I'm sure. It was an interesting scenario that obviously created the sort of windstorm of chaos that allowed for that video to be made. But hey, no need to worry about more videos like that coming from me. That is not how I like to operate. It was just sort of a one-time thing. I allowed myself one day to play in the playground, and that's kind of where that situation came from. It was an interesting video. A lot of people loved it. A lot of people didn't love it, and that's okay. I for sure had an absolute blast making it. I am really proud of the video. It turned out pretty much exactly how I wanted it to. And yeah, with that being said, let's just move on to the good old normal stuff. So today's topic should be interesting and a lot of fun to talk about. I'm pretty excited to discuss it with you guys, and it's actually a video and a conversation I initially did intend to post yesterday. The topic is actually more of a continuation to the video that I actually posted before that last video, where I discussed the life of the Nintendo Switch, how long Nintendo might be planning to make it their current relevant home console, and are they planning on supporting it for 4 years or 5 years? Recent statements came out that they're looking at 7 to 10 years that they might be looking at supporting the Nintendo Switch, which is definitely far different from my initial guesses as far as what I expected Nintendo to want to do. And there's so many different details and factors to consider when you look at how long would Nintendo want to support the Switch, how long would it make sense to support the Switch. That's kind of what that first conversation was really about, because there are just so many other things going on when you consider the fact that the Switch is a huge hit. It's selling so incredibly well. There's really no signs showing that it might slow down anytime soon, even though obviously we still need to wait and see what some of the biggest games on the Switch are going to be in 2018 that will continue the momentum. But I don't really think that any of us, myself included, expect to see that happen. I'm sure the momentum's going to continue, so you have a Switch that's going to probably continue to sell, which means the more your hardware is selling, the longer you want to support it, the longer you want to try to get other companies on board to develop their games, the longer you want to develop your own games. But then, of course, there's also what this video will be about, the possibility of looming future hardware, the fact that as great and powerful as the Switch is for the device it is, at some point over the next few years, it will become almost too outdated to really sustain itself, at least one would think. Then there's the topic of, do they upgrade the Switch? Do they release a Switch Pro or a new Nintendo Switch or a Switch Mini? Do they increase the power? Do they not increase the power? Does that affect the game development? Does Nintendo want to start working on more powerful hardware in the next couple of years and not be so stuck and restrained to the Nintendo Switch hardware? Again, nowadays in 2018, the hardware is fantastic. There's no reason to think that most developers or Nintendo are struggling to deal with that. I think, you know, most of them are probably happy with the hardware. But let's picture what the landscape of the gaming industry is going to look like in 2022, which is like going to be happening in a couple of years. We have to consider, would it make sense for Nintendo to want to continue to support the product? And so that's what actually brings me back to the main topic and what I alluded to a second ago. It's the looming hardware. It's what might actually happen with Sony or Microsoft, a PlayStation 5, an Xbox 2 or 720, or an Xbox, whatever the heck they want to call it. Who even knows? I mean, we don't even know if we can expect the next Xbox. Probably, but there are obviously weird signs and weird things coming from Microsoft, so it's really hard to predict what those guys are actually planning on doing. But we have to consider that future hardware. Now, I mentioned in that last video how I think that Nintendo probably would be paying attention to and considering what Sony and Microsoft might actually be doing with the PS5 and an Xbox 2. I'm just going to call it an Xbox 2 just to make this conversation that much easier throughout the rest of it. So I'm sure that Nintendo is paying attention or would be paying attention to what they would be doing with those new consoles. And, you know, I stated the argument that, hey, Nintendo doesn't really care about their competition a lot of times. Part of what makes them great is they like to separate themselves from the pack. They're marching to the beat of their own drum. So PlayStation 5, PlayStation 12, Xbox 57, whatever they're going to do there, does Nintendo really need to care if the Switch is still selling? It'll just still continue to be the hit that it is. And obviously that is very true. But I have to tell you, let's start getting into the actual situation. Let's create the fake the fake scenario where in 2020 or 2021 we have a PlayStation 5 and an Xbox 2 and still the same launch day Nintendo Switch. Let's not even go into like the Nintendo Switch Pro kind of thing or the upgrade or the mini. Let's just pretend it is this Nintendo Switch and a PS5 and an Xbox 2 launch. Do those consoles become a threat to Nintendo's success and to the Switch's success, I should say? And I think that, I mean, you'd have to think that there is a good possibility that, yeah, they would. Now, again, I know for a lot of Nintendo fans, it's easy to want to jump on the defensive train and be like, oh, Nintendo won't care. They'll still see success. The Switch is so fantastic. It's selling so well, and it's going to continue to sell well for as long as Nintendo wants. So even if a PlayStation 5 and an Xbox 2 comes out in a couple of years, that's not going to impact the Switch. The Switch is going to be fine, and it's going to be great forever because I love it. And I get that, man, because I love the Switch too, of course. But I feel like realistically, we have to consider the fact that a PS5 and Xbox 2 are probably coming. There were rumors last year about, you know, a 2019 release date for the PS5, or at the very least, maybe it was even just a reveal of the PS5 in 2019. And, you know, I've gone back and forth on whether or not I believe that or not. I made a video at the time, and I initially didn't feel like that makes a lot of sense. I feel like that's too soon. And I do still feel like releasing a PS5 in 2019 is too soon, but, you know, revealing it, having like a reveal event like they did for the PS4 in 2019, but not launching the console until 2020, I could believe that a little bit more. And so, you guys, that's only 2 years away. If there's any truth to that, maybe in 2 years a PS5 might be coming out. And if there's one thing we know, it's that Sony and Microsoft pay a lot of attention to each other, and those guys are always trying to be direct competitors. They're really paying attention to the moves of the other guys. So if we have a world where Sony's ready to release a PS5 in a couple of years, you'd have to think that Microsoft is going to be, you know, right there on board, following suit, ready to release their own console right before or right after in the same window. I mean, they've done that several times in the past as well. So these consoles could be coming, you know? And yeah, the Nintendo Switch is selling, but here's the thing. If those consoles really do release in 2, 3, 5 years, whatever, and Nintendo has showed us no signs of changing up the Nintendo Switch and making their successor console, as I've said before, whether it's a hybrid again or another home console, whatever they decide to do, you guys, even if Nintendo doesn't want to care what Sony and Microsoft are doing, there's going to be an impact from a PlayStation 5 and an Xbox 2 to this Nintendo Switch. There just is going to be. One of the main things I discussed on that last video is as hardware and technology continues to improve around the Nintendo Switch, for example, one thing that's going to happen is the developers and the other people in the industry making games for all these consoles, they're going to need more juice and more power and more capability out of the Nintendo Switch. I know it's not all about graphics. I know a lot of gamers shouldn't care about graphics and the power of a console, and Nintendo shouldn't care. They should just care about what the Nintendo Switch itself is. I get that. There's truth to that, but at the same time, Nintendo wants to have a viable piece of hardware in the market. They want it to be something that not only will gamers want to play, but developers will want to develop on. The Wii U showed us that struggling with the third-party development market can be a problem. Yes, Nintendo has the best hardware and the best games, and they really can scrape by and survive without a lot of third-party support, but honestly, I think they still ultimately need, and they want that. I mean, let's pretend they don't even need it. I think they do. Let's pretend they don't. They definitely want it. Absolutely. The Nintendo Switch is showing that, because with the Wii, they saw fantastic third-party support, and it's like one of the best-selling consoles of all time. The Wii U, not good third-party support, literally the worst-selling home console of all time. Okay, the Dreamcast, but you know, okay, the worst-selling Nintendo console of all time is the Wii U, and I freaking love the Wii U. You guys know that I love it, and so there's many factors that led to the Wii U not being successful, but not proper third-party support absolutely was a factor. But then you come to the Switch, and it started off strong with Nintendo properties, to be fair. I will absolutely admit, it was Breath of the Wild, a Nintendo-made game that helped launch a successful Nintendo Switch, followed by Mario Kart before we started to shake things up with indies and stuff. But nowadays, throughout the rest of 2017, and here we are in early 2018, the third-party developers are really jumping on board with the Nintendo Switch, and we know it's a huge reason why the system is seeing more and more success, and the momentum is continuing, because people believe Nintendo's going to continue to support this with their own content, which is the reason you buy Nintendo stuff. But also look at these third parties, look at these other games. I might be able to expect, I'm getting games like Doom and LA Noire and Resident Evil on my Switch alongside my Nintendo games. Maybe if we're going to get the Grand Theft Auto that we're all thinking about and all these other things, Wolfenstein is coming, Call of Duty, if that does actually happen. Like, if these things happen, yeah, it's going to help continue the momentum and it's all good. And so anyway, it's a little bit of a tangent, but the point is that third-party support can absolutely and will absolutely help your console, no matter what your console is, even a Nintendo product. And so Nintendo wants to make sure that, yes, while they're keeping themselves separate from the pack, they're also still involved and included enough that things like these third-party developers and just what the technology is doing in the industry around them is doing, and these companies will still be interested in wanting to develop for their platform. If the PS5 and the Xbox 2 come out, that's going to be such a game changer, and there will be so much of an impact to what the game development landscape of the video game industry is going to be doing, and a lot of people are going to develop their assets and their resources over to these new consoles because they will be on the cutting edge of home console technology. Obviously, PC is always going to be outpacing consoles, so we're not really talking about the PC thing. But if we look at the home console space, they will be on the cutting edge, and the Switch, you guys, I love it so much. It is the best. But if it's not changed up and Nintendo's showing us no signs of keeping pace with them, if that does happen in a couple of years, it's gonna hurt the Switch, you know? I mean, the Switch won't necessarily die, but it's gonna hurt the Switch, it's gonna hurt the perception, it's gonna hurt the sales, absolutely. And it's gonna hurt the support. Again, the whole thing I was just going on a tangent about a couple of minutes ago was the support from the industry and other developers. And, you know, also building off of another element that I discussed in that last video was the idea of Nintendo themselves wanting to do something new and wanting to deal with different hardware, better hardware, more powerful hardware, different controllers and different, you know, interfaces of how the gamer interacts with a Nintendo product and Nintendo hardware. And if anything, after a couple of years, around the time a PS5 and Xbox 2 might be coming out, Nintendo just themselves, for their own artistic vision, might be wanting to do something different, you know? And it's like, hey, if Sony and Microsoft are already coming out with a PlayStation 5 and an Xbox 2, and they have crazy powerful hardware, and again, we're not going to be able to keep pace completely with that, we need to do something, so we're going to bump up the technology in our new home console, or hybrid or whatever. We're going to change up the motion controls and whatever the control interface is. We're going to have our new crazy, quirky idea, and, you know, we're going to implement it into this machine, and that's how we're going to keep pace with what Sony and Microsoft are doing. So it's similar, but it's a little bit different because it's not all about the power. They do, however, still need to be on top of what Sony and Microsoft are doing, and vice versa, to be fair, you guys. I mean, let's be real, this definitely is a two-way street. It's not like Sony and Microsoft also can't care what Nintendo is doing just because they're making a different hybrid device as opposed to their home consoles. Trust me, Microsoft and Sony pay attention to Nintendo just as much as Nintendo pays attention to them. What all of these players do in the industry is important, and it helps move the industry forward, and it's good to know what your peers are doing. And Sony and Microsoft and Nintendo are peers, and so you can't turn a blind eye to what they're doing or to the advancement of technology. We know Nintendo will want to probably start developing a more powerful hardware just for themselves, you know? So they're not going to want to keep this around for that long if we get a PS5 and an Xbox 2. So to wrap this whole thing up, again, will the PlayStation 5 and Xbox 2 pose a huge threat to the Nintendo Switch? If the scenario happens where Nintendo doesn't do anything to adjust their business model around the Switch and we get a PS5 and an Xbox 2, in summary, I think a little bit. I'm not going to say a huge threat. It's not the nail in the coffin for the Switch. I mean, the Switch is continually just breaking records and shattering expectations. So even in a world where these new consoles would come out, I don't think that the Switch is going to be like dead on arrival all of a sudden. But as I laid out in this video, there's going to be an impact felt. There's going to be a ripple effect from a PlayStation 5 and an Xbox 2. And I mean, honestly, I would even be excited for those consoles, you guys. Obviously, you know me. I love my PlayStations and my Xboxes just as much as I love my Nintendos and my Switches. And I would be really excited to see what Sony and Microsoft are doing. It's weird though, man. I mean, I do have to stop for a second and talk about how weird it is to even be thinking about a PS5 and an Xbox 2. And to be fair, I mean, I created this conversation, don't get me wrong. I mean, there were rumors last year about a PS5, but really, there's nothing currently happening. This is just my own thinking because of the conversation I had in that last video that just got my brain thinking about more things. But still, I also feel like it's not entirely nuts to be considering, well, Sony and Microsoft are probably going to be making new pieces of hardware in the next 2 years. So what are those going to be? Yeah, that's a thought in my head. And it's like, dude, I weirdly almost feel like those are still new consoles. That was 5 years ago that those things launched. 2013, we got a PS4 and an Xbox One, and it feels weirdly kind of newish. I don't really understand why it does. There's something wrong with my brain, man. I'm like, oh yeah, I mean, you know, there's still many, many years to go in those. And it's like, oh wait, but no. Actually, no, they've been around for 5 years. and maybe they're at the end of their life and they're going to start doing new consoles, and then what does that do to the brand new Nintendo Switch? So it's really crazy. It's really messy. It's really weird. And it'll just be interesting to see, man. I mean, I will be excited for new hardware from from Sony and Microsoft, just like I am whenever Nintendo releases new hardware as well. So it'll be interesting to see. And so, yeah, I don't think it's going to be the nail in the coffin for the Nintendo Switch, but an impact will be felt, as I've said several times in this video. And, I mean, hopefully it all goes okay. So, that is going to be it for me today. Thanks, of course, as always, for tuning in, guys. I do want to hear what you have to say when we think about a PlayStation 5 and an Xbox 2, new hardware coming from Sony or Microsoft. Do you think we might see it as soon as 2020, like some of last year's rumors were starting to suggest? Do you think they're way farther off? They want to ride out the PS4 Pro and the Xbox One X for a good couple of years? If they do release these consoles sooner than later, and we have the same Nintendo Switch on the market, do you think they will impact or be potentially a threat to the Nintendo Switch? How do you think the dichotomy of that power relationship, and I don't mean like graphical power, I mean industry power relationship between a PlayStation 5, an Xbox 2, and a Nintendo Switch, how do you think that'll play out? Can Nintendo survive that and come out okay on the other side? While I think the impact will be felt, I think Nintendo could still ultimately survive because they are just, honestly, they're unstoppable no matter what happens. But I don't know. I want to hear what you guys think about this whole crazy scenario. And that is going to be it. Thank you again so much for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Rule of Two Review, and I'll catch you next time on another video.